All right, we're going to take a look at solving equations with variables on both sides. Please jot down these 4 steps. First step, simplify both sides of the equation separately. So in other words, we're just combining like terms. Second step, add or subtract the variable to get it on one side of the equation. Third step, solve using inverse. Inverse is just a fancy word for the opposite operation. Like the opposite of multiply, or the inverse of multiply is divide. And we're doing PEMDAS in reverse order. So we do add and subtract first, then multiply and divide, then exponents, then parentheses. Alright, fourth step, it's the check step. You want to make sure that the left side equals the right side of the equation. So you're going to need to plug it back in, the variable more than once actually, since you have variables on both sides. Alright, pause the video if you need more time. And now on to example 1. Copy down example 1, 9a plus 2 equals 4a minus 18. Alright, we're going to look back at our steps. So step 1 is to make sure that both sides are simplified. That's already done. 9a and 2, those aren't like terms. And then the right side, 4a and minus 18, those are not like terms. So the first step's already done. So we're on the second step already. We want to make sure that the variables are combined to one side by either adding or subtracting. So I can either move the 9a to the right side or the 4a to the left side. Which one do you think makes more sense? Can you take 9 from 4 or 4 from 9? That's right, 4 from 9 makes more sense. So we have a positive 4a, so a minus 4a will cancel that. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. So 4a minus 4a is nothing. I'm going to bring down my negative 18. And then 9a minus 4a gives me 5a. I bring down my plus 2. So we're done with the second step. Now it looks like a two-step equation. So two-step equation, we do PEMDAS in reverse. So we do add and subtract first. So we're adding 2. What's the inverse of adding 2? Yeah, subtracting 2. So we subtract 2 to both sides and we get 5a equals negative 18 minus 2. It's getting more negative, so it's negative 20. And now we're on our multiply or divide step, so we're doing 5a. That means 5 times a, so the inverse is divide by 5. And now a is going to be negative 4. Almost done. We finished the third step. Remember, our fourth step is just to check it. So we want to make sure that our answer makes sense. So I'm going to plug it back in. I'm plugging in that negative 4 for a and that negative 4 for my a over here. So it would be 9. I'm going to use parentheses when I do that. 9 parentheses negative 4 plus 2 equals 4 parentheses negative 4 minus 18. So 9 times negative 4 is negative 36 plus 2. 4 times negative 4 is negative 16 minus 18. And if I combine the negative 36 plus 2, I get negative 34. It's becoming more positive. And then these are becoming more negative, so I add them and keep the sign. I get negative 34. Since they both check, since they're both equal, then it checks. So we know we did it right. Alright, I'm going to move on to example 2. We'll get just a little trickier. I'm going to give you one that has more of a first step there. Alright, take a second to jot down example 2. 3x plus 3 minus 7x equals negative 1 plus x plus 14. Alright, first step, we want to combine our like terms on each side. I'm going to treat these separately. So I have 3x and a minus 7x. So I'm going to box those. And I said I'm going to treat those separately, so let's just do that one first. So 3x minus 7x gives us negative 4x, Then I just bring down my circled plus 3 because it doesn't have anything to pair it with. Now I'm going to treat the right side separately. So negative 1 I'll circle and plus 14 I'll circle. And then I'll box my plus x. And negative 1 plus 14 is 13. So I have 13 plus x. And now I've simplified each side separately. So I'm done with step 1. Alright, step 2, we want to make sure the variable gets moved to one side, and we do that through adding and subtracting. So I could either move the x over here, or I could move the negative 4x over here. It really doesn't matter, it's just preference. If you want to deal with just positive numbers, you can move the negative 4x to the right side. So I'm going to try that. So to do that, I would just do plus 4x, because the inverse of a minus 4x is plus 4x, and that makes that nothing. So I do that to the other side, right next to the x term. And since that's nothing, it would just be 3 equals, and what is 1x? That's really a 1x plus 4x gives us 5x. So it's 5x, and I can reverse the order thanks to the commutative property. So it's really 5x, and that's a positive 13. So plus 13. Alright, so we're done with the second step. Now it just looks like a two-step equation. So we just use inverse operations. So we're doing PEMDAS in reverse. So remember how that looks. We do add and subtract first. So we're adding 13. The inverse is subtracting 13. I do it to both sides. Then I bring down the 5x. And 3 minus 13, that's getting more negative, so it would be a negative 10. And now we're on multiply and divide steps. So we're multiplying by 5. The inverse is dividing by 5. So negative 10 divided by 5 is negative 2. So x equals negative 2. I'm done with my third step. I just want to check it and make sure it is right. So here we go. I'm going to plug in that negative 2 every time I see an x. It's okay for one like this to get out your calculator. But you're going to still write down your steps on paper. So you're going to put 3 parentheses negative 2 plus 3 minus 7, and I have another x there. So I put in parentheses negative 2. And then I'm running out of room, so I'm going to erase here. And then equals negative 1 plus my negative 2 plus 14. So I plugged in a negative 2 there, and I plugged it twice on the left side. Alright, so now you can just type in the left side of the equation in your calculator, just as you see it, and then type in the right side just as you see it. And I went ahead and showed the work by hand. This one wasn't too hard. So if I typed in that whole left side, it gives me 11. Type in the whole right side, it gives me 11. They equal each other. So the 4-step checks. Alright, we're going to do one more example with distributive property. Alright, take a second and copy down example 3. 1/2 parentheses 8x minus 2 equals 8x plus 2 minus x. Alright, we're going to simplify each side. So I'm going to distribute on the left side. So 1/2 times 8x and 1/2 times negative 2. When you're multiplying by a half, all you're doing is taking half of that number. So what's 1/2 of 8? That would be 4x. What's 1/2 of negative 2? Well, half of 2 is 1, so that's a negative 1. Now on the right side, it's going to be a little bit different. There's no distributive property, we're just boxing and circling our like terms. So 8x minus x gives us 7x, and just bring down the plus 2. So first step is done. Everything is simplified on each side. Our second step, we want to get x over to one side by adding or subtracting. So think, can you take 4x from 7x? Or can you take 7x from 4x? I would prefer to take the 4x away. You can do it either way. So I'm going to do minus 4x and minus 4x. Again, you could have done minus 7x minus 7x. So that gives me 0, which is what I want. I want to cancel the x from one side. And then 7x minus 4x is 3x. Notice I lined up my x terms. And then I just bring down my plus 2. So I'm done with my second step. Third step, use inverse operations. And we're using PEMDAS backwards. So we do add and subtract. So we're adding 2. So we want to subtract 2. And we get negative 1 minus 2 is negative 3. Bring down my 3x. Now we're on multiply and divide. We're multiplying by 3. So the inverse is dividing by 3. And negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1. So there's our third step, and then our last step, our fourth step, is just to do the check step. So I'm going to plug in my x value to the very top. So that negative 1 gets plugged in 3 times. And as I'm copying that down, I'm running out of room, so if you need to pause it, you can. I'm going to erase. And I'm just plugging in parentheses every time I see an x, so the negative 1 plus 2, and then that says minus x, so that's minus a negative 1. And remember, you can't have a minus and negative, that really means a big plus sign there. So I'm going to change that to just a plus 1. Alright, you can type that whole thing in your calculator the way you see it. If you prefer, you can do 0.5 for 1/2 when you type it in. I went ahead and just showed the work, and again, you could have just typed that whole thing in your calculator. Just be careful with the parentheses. The left side gives you a negative 5, and plug in the right side in your calculator, it should give you a negative 5. So for the fourth step, they equal each other, so it checks. So solving equations with variables on both sides is as easy as 4 steps.